The scale that I've created is nothing fancy, but if you look at the front view, you can see that we are going to be able to see the rectangle here, this curved piece, and then also we'll be able to see the other rectangle from the other side. So I'm going to go ahead and draw those out to create kind of what that shape is going to look like. The first rectangle. The curved shape we know is going to look like a rectangle as well because the curve is on the z-axis, and in the front view we're only dealing with the x and y axes. So we need to make sure we are not utilizing the z-axis for any reason because we don't have the z-axis in that front view. So we've created the first rectangle, this curved piece, which again we can't see that curve from the front plane because it's on the z, and we can also see that last rectangle. Now, if you look back at your ISO, you can see that this is a curved edge up here, but it does come down to a point. So I'm going to start by kind of creating the middle of that curve and then just gradually create it down. Again, we don't have any particular measurements, so we're just kind of making the scale up as we go. So you want to make sure that you're adding that. And again, you notice that I created it as a construction line, very light, kind of feathery line, and then I went back over it with a visible line to create a much more uniform shape. Now, also from the front view, you can see that we have a circle that we need to include in our front view. So we will find the center of that, and we will actually create that circle as well. Now again, you guys had to sketch these, so I understand if you don't have a perfect shape. This is obviously not a perfect circle by any means, but I want to make sure that you guys at least have something that you can put down as a line that would make sense. Now, anytime we have a circle, we need to make sure we are giving center lines. Reason being, if we were to take a shape and we needed to cut a hole in the center, we need to make sure that we are giving both the x and y axes in the front view to be able to show where that would go. For instance, if I have this block and this is my front view, I need to show where this drill bit is actually going to be placed in the shape in order to cut it. So not only do I need to know the x value as to where that lines up, but I also need to know the y value as to where it lines up. Those two lines together will give me the coordinates for where my drill bit is supposed to go. So in my front view, I need to make sure that I have the y value designating the fact that it is going to be centered on that y value somewhere, and then I also have my x value going through. Now you know that center lines are long, short, long. It just happens to be that we took two of them and put them together to create the overall view as to what that's going to look like. Now, aside from that, this is a curved piece and we will have to put a center line in, but I'm going to show you how to do that once we get to the top view. At this point in time, the front view is completely finished and we can move on to the right side view. So let's transfer our information over, all of it. I'm even going to take this center line and I'm going to transfer every line over using construction lines. It's a lot of lines. And they're a little bit darker than I would normally like, but because we're doing a recording, I want to make sure that you can actually see them. I also, just as a rule of thumb or as a habit, take my lines up to the top. I know that we might be starting with our right side view, and that's fine, but we need to make sure that we are transferring all the lines up in order for them to be aligned with what we need to do. And you saw I may have even taken a center line up, and that's perfectly fine too. You want to make sure that you're taking all of your lines up so that you know where they go. So right off the bat, I'm going to typically, if I were just speaking to what I do, I actually go from the front view to the top view. It seems to make more sense to me, and it's become a habit of mine over the years. Now, I know by looking at the top view of my ISO that this gray area is going to be flat, and it's going to create that curved shape that I still have yet to see in the front view. So I'm going to leave some space, and I'm going to create the line that goes from here to here, which is representing this edge in my top view. Now, the reason I stopped here is because this point aligns with this edge representing this rectangle in the front view. So I need to make sure that everything's aligned. A lot of people with the bridges had their front view where it needed to be, and then their bottom view or top views were off to the side. That's not okay. It needs to line up. I'm also going to create this piece right here that's representing this line. I'm going to go over to the right to create that overall back shape right here. And then I'm going to finish off the shape by creating this overall edge. Now, if you notice, I can stop right here on the outside of that curve because I know that it aligns with this point in my front view. So right off the bat, I know that the curve has to be between these 2 points, and it's going to stop right here. Again, you might not know that scale, and that's okay because we didn't give you a definitive scale. So we're just kind of winging it when it comes to the actual size of the curve. But what we want to make sure we're doing is that we've got everything aligned between the 2 views. So now that we have our curve, we need to start adding our center lines. Anytime you have a curve, you need to have a center line. Reason being, if you didn't have the curve there, or if you didn't have the center line there, it would look like just a squared off piece. If this was a squared slot, we wouldn't put center lines. So in our front view, we would still have an appropriate drawing because it doesn't have center lines and it would be a squared slot. So we need to incorporate those center lines in order to designate the fact that it is a curve and that it will be aligned. Now if you notice, the center lines are going past the visible lines. I saw a lot of people when doing this that they were creating their visible lines, their hidden lines in between, and then their center lines were also in between. Do you see how they all look like hidden lines? So what we need to do is designate our center lines by extending them past the actual drawing, and that will make them look more like center lines instead of hidden lines. From there, we need to create this back rectangle in our ISO, which again is just going to go on the back part of the top view because I know that it's behind this little rectangle that we have here, or this odd shape that we have up front with that curve. Now we also know that this hole is part of this top piece here, or this back piece in the top view, which is going to be represented by hidden lines. So if I trace my construction lines up, this is where those hidden lines are going to be. If I trace the other side of the curve up, or the other side of the circle up, this is where those hidden lines are going to be. And then I'm going to take my center line and transfer it up. It just so happens that in this case, our center lines are aligned from not only the circle in the back, but also from this curve in the top piece. Now that brings me back down to my front view because I am missing a center line here in my front view to designate the fact that we would use a drill bit to cut that circle out, and then we would just cut those 2 pieces to take that center hollow piece out of the top view. So I need to designate the fact that those go the whole way through. From there, I need to start creating my right side view, which a lot of people were taking their 45-degree angle from this point. You guys know that you need to take it from the topmost and rightmost point of your front view. So you need to go all the way to that top edge and then all the way to the right side edge. And where the 2 intersect is where that 45 degree is going to go from. So if we take that 45-degree angle from this point off to the side, and again, that's why I gave you the regular graph paper, was so that you could create that 45 degree as neatly as possible. We're going to take all of the information that we have, including center lines, over to the 45 degree. Once they hit the 45 degree, we're done. We don't have to take them any farther than that. I saw a lot of people taking their lines the whole way out, and that can be kind of confusing. At that point, once it hits the 45, we drop it like it's hot, and we bring it straight down. Once we have all of these lines transferred, what we can do is start matching up what they go to in the right side view. Now, before I actually start the right side view, what I always like to do is, I've got a lot of lines. I brought a lot of lines over from my front view. I have a lot of lines coming down from my right side view, or from my top view. What I like to do is come up with the outside edge of what that right side view could possibly be. So I know that this edge from my top view, bringing it down, this is going to be the outermost or the frontmost part of my right side view. I'm not going to make it a visible line yet. It's still a darker construction line because I'm just creating the guidelines as to what size my right side view could be. I also know that the back part of my right side view is going to be back here on this line. So I'm going to drag that over. And I'm also going to designate the height from my top view or from my front view over can only be that. So looking at my right side view, everything that's going to fit into the right side view has to fit inside of that box. It might not take up the whole thing, but it needs to take up a lot of it. Okay? So what I can start doing is if I look back at my ISO, I know that from the right side view I can see this rectangle, I can see this curved piece, and that's about it as far as visible pieces. So what I need to do is start creating that rectangle. That rectangle goes all across the bottom edge of my right side view. It goes up, and the only way that I know the height of it is by the front view. So if I brought that information over, this would be my overall height. So I'm going to draw that as a rectangle. And then I'm going to finish it off by creating the other side of the rectangle. So I already have created this rectangle from my ISO in my right side view. I also know that this piece, this rounded triangle, isn't going to look like a rounded triangle in the right side view. It's going to look more like a rectangle. And I can get that information from my top view. So right off the bat, this is our thickness or our Z value for the right side view. If I take that information over, which I have already done, and I drop it down, I know that the right side view can only fit within this space. So already I've created the bottom rectangle, I've created this rounded rectangle, which from the right side view looks only like a rectangle, and all of my visible lines have been accounted for. At this point, I now need to add in those hidden lines. Just because the circle can't be seen from the right side view doesn't mean it's not there. If it's a hidden line in the top view, which it looks like that circle is, then I need to transfer that information over to the right-hand side as well. And it looks like I already did with my front view, and I'm going to create my hidden lines to designate the fact that the outside edges of my circle won't be seen from the right side view, but are still available. I also need to bring over my center line to designate that this is a hole and not a squared cutout, so that's going to be transferred over as well. And again, this is a sketch, so if you're a little bit off, as you can see, I'm a little bit closer to this hidden line than I am this one. That's okay, but I need to make sure that everything is as aligned as possible. Aside from that, I also need to take care of this curve, which if I brought it over and down, is going to create a hidden line right here in my front view. It's also going to have a center line. Again, if it's a curved edge, it needs to have a center line to designate where that hole would actually be cut. So if I take it over from the top view and down, I need to designate the fact that that y-axis is still there with a center line that protrudes past those visible lines. At this point, my ortho has been completely finished, and what I would do is add my dimensions if I needed. The other